If you want to go to Fun Church, they'll be leaving. Turn with me, if you would, in your Bibles today to the book of John, the Gospel of John, chapter 11. We'll be looking at the last few verses of that chapter today. John's Gospel, chapter 11. Last Sunday we got Lazarus out of the tomb. Jesus said, loose him and let him go. Can use some of those things as examples. It's a historical thing. I believe that Jesus really did raise a man who had been dead for 4 days, raise him back to life. But there are many people, I believe, who are saved, that they've been resurrected spiritually, but they're still bound in some way. They're still kind of wrapped up. They haven't been loosed and let go. And growing in our faith, becoming mature, getting stronger, becoming more faithful, and maturing in our faith is the key word, I guess. Go back to that, the first one that I chose, as things that loose us. They release us. Part of your discipleship, part of your discipline should be self-examination, where you can say, what's holding me down? What's holding me back? And sometimes you might be mistaken if you're looking for terrible, awful sinfulness. We might be looking at, that's something that the Pharisees and the religious leaders of Jesus' day were always saying, we've kept the Ten Commandments, but in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, the writer was talking about, he says, let us lay aside every weight, and the sin which does so easily beset us. He said, yes, there might be some sins that always set us back, always hinder us, but he says, sometimes there's just weights. After work one evening this week, I went and got something to eat. I don't even remember, tacos, I think. And I went and sat over at the Flint Elementary School, and I parked over by the baseball field. It doesn't look anything at all. Not anything at all like it did when we played baseball there. But I remember when we transferred from playing out in Johnson's cow pasture, playing baseball there. Like the great Dizzy Dean said, he slid into what he thought was second base. We transferred from Johnson's pasture to actually right next to the Flint Elementary School. They built us a very fine baseball field there. It never had a grass infield, but it was nice. It was well kept. It had a fence around it, had a nice backstop, had a concession stand with a second story where the announcers and commentators could sit up there and talk over a scratchy, loud, or PA system, and then had dugouts for each team, the home and the visiting team, and bleachers to sit on for all the parents and grandparents and spectators. So I went there and had lunch, and to remember and reminisce. Reflecting on the past and thinking of days gone by, it's important I could see some improvements had been made. The lights were better. The bleachers looked more comfortable. Everything looked safer. And there are actually 2 fields there. There's a batting cage there. That I hope that when looking at my life, I can say, well, there have been some improvements. There are some things that are better. I think God has done some good. I've allowed God, I've gotten out of the way, so I'm allowing God to make some improvements in my life. But I remember when we first came there, we still we were on this really nice baseball field. but we're still acting like we were at Johnson's pasture. And so the game was about to begin, and their little team was over. We played West Morgan, Danville, Summit, Caddo, Slip Up, Neal. I'll leave anybody out. It's about our bunch. We got to know those boys, some of those boys better than others over the years. Became good friends with them. Went to school with some of them. The coach for Slip Up, Arnold Russell, was umpiring. He's probably gone on to baseball. He's at the field. He went into the cornfield by now, I suspect, but for many years he continued to. Arnold Russell. He was their coach, and he was the best little boys coach I believe I ever met. He was just so good with the kids, and he knew so much about baseball. He always had a newspaper in his back pocket. You've probably often wondered, why does our preacher sometimes look like he's cross-eyed? Well, this is the answer to your deep question. This eye right here, my left eye, will not move to the left at all. My eyes, like yours, move. My left eye will move to the right, and I can look at you out of the corner of my. But if you're standing over here, and I look at you, this eye doesn't go anywhere, and this one goes right into my nose. And I was hitting balls one day, and we were getting ready for a big game that night, and Arnold was there watching us bat and pitch. There were just a few of us there. And he is the one, he says, if you ever tried hitting left-handed, because when I would stand in the batter's box, I was like this. But I really only ever, for any vision, because I have this problem with my eye, I only use my right eye for anything. So I would stand in the batter's box, and I'd look at the pitcher with my right eye, and the pitcher was going. He didn't know where I was looking. He thought, why is he looking at the third baseline? I was looking right at him with my right eye, and I'd be like that. I use one eye. You lose a lot of depth perception like that. And so Arnold said, stand on the other side of the plate. I've never heard of that. So I stood on the left-hand side of the, and when I looked, I was using both my eyes. And I didn't have to turn my whole head. I could look out of the corner of my eye. I could see the plate and see the pitcher and see the whole field. And so from that time on, I began my career as a switch hitter. Boy, that's really neat. Because you get up and he throws you a pitch and maybe miss it. And you go to the umpire and you step across the plate to the other side, and the pitcher, it completely messes with his mind. And if I can decide, it depends. If one of the biggest strategies in pitching is, should we use a right-handed pitcher or a left-handed pitcher? I saw something last night on video that I've never seen in my entire life, Ronnie. A guy who could throw just as well with his left hand as with his right. A pitcher. And so he got up like this, and he went, I don't know his name. I'm going to have to go look it up. Whew. And the guy swung at it and missed. And then the batter kind of had that look in his eye like, yeah, throw that one again. I got your number now. And that guy, he took his glove that he was wearing on his left hand, and he switched it over, and it doesn't really work well, but he put it on his right hand, he turned around, and then he threw another fastball with his left hand, and the guy missed it that time too. And his motion looked, now if I tried to throw left-handed, that would never work. I would look like they were talking about throwing like a girl. That would look, not to be defamatory to girls, but that's worse. But we were out in the field, and we all had our bats. We'd gotten into the equipment, and every one of us was out there, out in front of the dugout, practicing our swing. Brian Hawkins reared his bat back, and guess what? He hit me right in the mouth. He hit me right in the mouth with that bat. So we had to learn, everybody get in the dugout, put the bats up, and we got a circle over here. If you're going to practice swinging, that's where you stand. It's the on-deck circle. We found out something else too, that they had little metal rings. What were they called?
Donuts.
A donut. And it weighed maybe 3.5 pounds. It wasn't very heavy, but you slip it onto a bat, and it would go almost to the end of the bat, into the fat part of the bat, where you say the sweet spot was, just beyond the trademark on a bat, a baseball bat. And you would swing that, and that weight, it does something to your muscles. And that's what it's doing. You can see it still in professional baseball, and they have all different kinds of weights and different kinds of things that they use in the on-deck circle. Now, when you take that weight off and you get into the batter's box to actually bat, that bat feels like it weighs a feather weight. There are weights that we might think, well, that's not a bad thing. It could be a good thing. It could be part of my training. It could be a part of my preparation. But the writer of Hebrews says there are weights that you need to get rid of. There are things that are holding you down. Maybe your pockets are full of things. Maybe you got things around your neck, but it's not a sin, but it's just something that's keeping you from being the best Christian you could possibly be. Jesus said, loose him and let him go. Well, let's look at verse 45. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. But some of them went their way to the Pharisees and told them what things Jesus had done. You know, in the first chapter of Galatians, Paul makes some statements there that seem unbelievable. He said there are some people out there and they're preaching Christ for all the wrong reasons. They're preaching Christ and their intent or their purpose are, he says, I'm telling you there are people who are preaching Christ that you need to be very careful of. He says because they're just not right. And then he comes to the conclusion, however, he said, at least Christ is preached. At least he's preached. Here are some people that came to tell the Pharisees everything that Jesus was doing. And believe me, I believe that they were probably truthful and very accurate. Their intention was to just tell the Pharisees what they saw, not to interpret it or to expound upon it. And so these were people who were telling other people about Jesus. Well, their purpose was to find something wrong, to be able to find something to complain about or criticize about or something that would condemn him. When I was growing up, and I wasn't a great fan of the news, but we only had news on television or on the radio about 30 minutes a day. I remember when I became a teenager, they started doing on network television an hour-long news broadcast. It was like 5 to 6 or 5:30 to 6:30. That's when Chet Huntley and David Brinkley began to broadcast. I guess I'd have to say that I thought it was one of those good advancements when we started having network or our cable television networks, that all they did was news. And they broadcast news all day long and 24 hours a day. The thing about it is that newscasters and their producers came to an understanding, an idea that only bad news sells newspapers or advertising. But when I began listening to the news, even people like Walter Cronkite, you know what he was reporting? He would say, that's the way it is. And all he was doing was reading. What they used to call being a newscaster was someone who read the news. They would tell you what happened. They didn't tell you why. They didn't tell you what it meant. Or they didn't tell you what you should think about it. Now, when I listen to the news today, I hear every one of them selling something. They're pushing an agenda. They have a point of view. And they're really, really not all that interested in whether or not this is really true or not. But they see themselves as influencers. And they want to influence how you believe and how you vote and how you spend your money. Truth is almost completely gone. These people came, and I believe that they reported to the Pharisees what Jesus did. Now, they came to the wrong conclusion about what Jesus was doing and what it meant. That can happen. My dad used to sit and watch the news 24 hours a day when he'd fall asleep on the couch. The only thing that delivered him from the news, I guess. My dad became very pessimistic, very narrow, very cynical, very critical of almost anything and everything. And he began to think of the world as an awful, terrible place to live where everything was going to hell. Because that's exactly what was being pitched to him on the television. Now, I guess preaching is about influencing, but I just give you some advice. Turn your TV off every once in a while. Don't listen to so much of the news. Or if you can find a newspaper or a radio station or a broadcaster or a reporter who just actually says, this is the way it was. This is what happened. In verse 47 it says, and then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council and said, what are we going to do? For this man does many miracles. What are we accomplishing? This man is performing many signs. Well, that's a problem. This man is making the blind to see. That's a problem. He just raised a dead man. That's a real problem. You need to step back. I try to step back. I want to step back and say, I'm in a train of thought that I'm coming to believe that this is a bad thing, that this is not good, that this is awful, this is terrible. And I look at it, well, wait a minute. I say, you got to look at stuff. You know what we used to think? I mean, just a few years ago, you know what we used to think the most terrible thing in the world was? Children in cages. Children in cages. Well, that's awful. That's terrible. You know how many children are in cages now? About 4 times as many as there were. The difference is it's not a problem anymore. We don't even care about it anymore. Nobody talks about it. But there are more children in cages now than there have ever been. If you don't know what I'm talking about, good for you. Don't go find out. But nobody cares about children in cages. It used to be the most terrible thing in the entire world. And that's a bad thing. Jesus was doing good things. In a previous chapter, a lot of people started picking up rocks and they're going to throw them. Jesus said, I've done a lot of miraculous things in your presence. For which one of those are you stoning me? For which one of those? Was it when I fed 5,000? Is that why you're throwing rocks at me? If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come and take away our temple and our nation. Their patriotism, their nationality, their nationalism, their sense of culture, and their sense of who they were and their church was more important to them than Jesus. You see, they believed that everything that they believed about their church and their nation was good and true, and Jesus was threatening that. I'm a patriot. I love our nation. But I don't love our nation more than I love Jesus. I've told people before, say, look here, I love you. If you think I love you more than I love Jesus, I just don't. I'm sorry. It's not that I hate you and I love Jesus. I just love Jesus more. We got a problem here, and something is that they couldn't see Jesus as someone who was more important than the temple. Jesus even made that statement one time. He said, there is someone here with you, Jesus said, more important than the temple. Oh, wow! Let me tell you something. There's something in Jesus that's more important than church. Or anything you've ever done at church. Or anything that's ever happened at church. Or anything any church has ever done. There is not one little bitty thing about Jesus that is not more important than any or all of that. Whatever you think it means to be an American. Do you know that in throwing out everything that pardon me for being political this morning, it's not in the notes, but one of the things that the present administration did in order to make a statement was that they took Lee Greenwood and threw him off of the council for, I can't even remember what its formal title is, the Council for American Exceptionalism, so whatever it is, or the arts. I think it is. It has to do with the arts. The American Lee Greenwood. We've got to get rid of him. You know why? Because he has written and sung the most popular song about being an American. I'm glad to be an American because at least I know I'm free. You know, you've heard Lee Greenwood sing that song. Last week in Huntsville at the Von Braun Civic Center, they had a blowout. And they brought Alabama and Lord knows who all else, Leonard Skinner and about 25 other acts to honor Lee Greenwood. Right. And they all came. I don't know how it turned out. I just assume it was great. And they were trying to say, Lee, we don't want you to have your feelings hurt. We're going to have a party in Huntsville for you in the new theater. And we're going to sing about being an American. That's kind of where we're at as our country. There are some people in our country who are saying anything and everything that you used to celebrate about being an American, we're throwing it out. We don't believe in it anymore. We don't like it. We believe it's racist. And we believe that it's narrow-minded and it's bigoted. So it's not being presented as popular anymore to be a patriot. And I love all of that. Listen, I'm not going to die for all of that. I'm not going to stand up on a post. I'm not going to post on Facebook about, I didn't even go to the Lee Greenwood concert. I probably would have enjoyed it. A lot of good musicians there. That's not a hill I want to die on, or that's not something I want to march about, or I don't want to get mad or upset. Let's talk about Jesus. There were people, their nation, to be a Jew, to be a Hebrew, to have Jerusalem, the holy city, the temple, and everything about their faith and their religion and every expression of it. How could it be that when the Messiah came, when the Son of God appeared, that he was in some way a threat to all of that? But he still is. He still is. Yeah, their temple came to them from God. The temple was God's idea. Their nation was founded by God in Abraham. There's nothing wrong with those things. But sometimes those things and the traditions and the history that comes along with them becomes more important to me and you than Jesus himself. You know what that means? That means that anything that actually, literally, Jesus might do could put our church or our patriotism in jeopardy. Let's look at the next slide, Carter. Then one of them named Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one may die for the people than that the whole nation perish. In the next verse it says, he said, now Caiaphas didn't say that because he was smart. Jesus gave Simon Peter a compliment like that one time. Said, good job, Peter. You didn't say that because you're smart, but because God told you. And that's exactly what's being said here. He says, he did not say this on his own, but as a high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. He said, you know, even Caiaphas knew that yes, it was better for one person to die than the whole nation be destroyed. John was recording this. And not only for that nation, but for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. I remember early in my ministry, teaching and preaching as a pastor, I started out, and for 5 or 6 years, I began preaching when I was 14 years of age. And it was strange. I was talking with several the other day. If I wanted to find a preacher boy or a young woman or a young man that was out just serving God and giving their testimony and burning up the woods, I don't know of any. Our county used to be covered up with them, and I was one of them. I remember the era in which Phil Waldrop, for instance, kind of came into his ministry. There were lots of us preacher boys. Every church, I remember when I went to the Vandale Baptist Church, and the first Sunday that I was there, a little boy who was about 12 years old walked right up to me and he says, God's called me to preach. I said, well, maybe not. Go check again. Tried to talk him out of, we talk up somebody out of something like that. It wasn't from God anyway, but when I was 14, people would have me come preach at their church because seeing somebody's 14 years old preach is different. And I didn't know what to preach about. I didn't know what the Bible said very much other than what I was learning. But I had me several little sermons. Talked with Danny Ward. He's probably got he's got a whole row of bullets that he likes to do, but if they ever call him to come back and preach at a church he's already been before, he's got to come up with a new sermon. That's inconvenient, isn't it? Dead gum. But I preached for years, just going from place to place to place. I never even wrote down what I preached on. I hadn't figured they'd ever have me back. Sometimes they did. What did I preach on? That's when I started dating Terry. I said, what did I preach when I went here? She said, I don't know. Something about the Bible, I don't know. Yeah, you're not much help. Is Terry much help to you? I didn't think so. Well, anyway. And I had me some Jim Nandies. I had some sugar sticks, some depth charges. There. Wait a minute. I brought this to the pulpit last Sunday. It's my old Bible. It's just about turned to dust. On this page it's falling out. There's 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 45. And there's the titles of my sermons. I can still tell you what they're about. Yeah, they're all pretty bad. Now anyway, go over here. Here's the people I baptized. I started keeping a list of them, and I said, that's too much trouble to keep up with. Here's all the people I baptized just as soon as I got this Bible. Here's the people I married. You know what? I've married a lot of people over here. You know what I see them when I first see them? Well, I say, you still married? A lot of times they're not. Sometimes they are. You still married?
Yeah.
I married y'all, didn't I?
Yeah.
Y'all still married?
Yeah.
I married y'all. Y'all still married, ain't you? Look around. That's all. They're all still married. That's strange. I'm looking for 1 through 35. That may be gone. But when I became a pastor and I started teaching or preaching every Wednesday night, every Sunday morning and every Sunday night, I was going to have to figure out what the Bible said. I was going to study the Bible, not just pieces of it, not just parts of it, not just the parts that I like. And when it came time for me to leave the first law, I was there 3.5 years at the Fosterville Baptist Church, and I told them, I said, I've preached everything I know, and a lot of stuff I don't even know. I've run out of stuff. I told them, like Elijah over there by the brook Cherith, I said, my brook's run dry. And they just made fun of me. Brook run dry? Yeah. You've never been there. Jesus preached and he taught and they couldn't see the conclusions they'd come to. You know, I used to preach that when Jesus, with all my old sermons, I used to preach and teach that the straw that broke the camel's back. In other words, what finally made we don't like Jesus, we're against Jesus, we're opposing Jesus, we're having Jesus followed around. I used to say when Jesus chased the money lenders out of the temple, that's what got Jesus crucified. Now definitely that doesn't help. I imagine that's what some of the disciples said to Jesus after that event. Lord, that don't help. That don't help. Now, riding into Jerusalem on the donkey, that was a great idea. Getting off the donkey, going into the temple, making a whip and chasing everybody out, not so much. Do you know what one thing made up their mind? I mean, when they finally said, well, he's been doing lots of signs and wonders and miracles. But then something happened, and they said, no, we're going to have to kill him. We've been trying to figure out how to adjust this and how to level this out, how to smooth it over. No. Caiaphas said, y'all don't get it, do you? He says, we're going to have to kill him. You know what it was? The straw that broke the camel's back? It's when he raised Lazarus from the dead. If this guy can raise the dead, we don't have any arguments. We can't debate with him. We can't reason with him. We can't disagree with him. We can't ignore him. If this man can raise the dead, we can't stand in a room and say, okay, it's either Jesus or us. He can raise the dead. There's only one thing left. We've got to kill him. The primary message, the number one message that the Christians in the first church preached about Jesus was the resurrection. Jesus, he was dead and he's alive. And they knew about his teachings and his doctrine and the lessons and the many things that he said, but so much of that they didn't understand. But they did know that they'd seen him crucified and then he was alive. They had been there the day that he had raised Lazarus from the dead, and that's when all of his opponents decided, no, we can't run against that. We're going to have to kill him. Isn't that odd? Isn't that strange? The most powerful thing that you and I can believe about Jesus is that he died for us, but then he came to life. He's alive now. And one day when you and I die, and I put something up, one of the quotes that I put on Facebook this, you remember, I'm going to close with this. Thank you for your patience. Remember when Jesus showed up and Martha came out to him and said, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Jesus said, look, your brother is going to live again. Your brother is going to live again. And she said, Lord, I believe that in the resurrection, that he is going to be raised on that great day of judgment. I believe, he was talking about Lazarus, your brother is just about, in a few minutes, he's going to be alive. But she was saying, oh yes, I have studied my Sunday school lesson. I believe the Bible. And there's going to be a resurrection someday. And there's going to be a judgment day. And yes, I do believe that. Most Christians that you meet at a funeral are going to say, yeah, I believe that one of these days there's going to be the resurrection. I believe in that. And I'll be able to see my loved one again. And this is what Jesus said to Martha. He says, no. He said, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about believing in the resurrection. He says, let me tell you something. Let me tell you what to believe in. Jesus said, I am the resurrection. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And he that believeth in me, even though he die, he shall live again. I don't know what you believe about the resurrection, or about the cross, or about the truth, or the gospel. You may have all of your doctrine lined up just exactly right, but in every case, Jesus is going to say, no, you're missing it. Lord, we can look in your Bible, we look in the Word, and we're just trying to find the way. And Jesus said, I am the way. We're just looking for the life we should be living. Jesus said, I am the life. We're looking for the true facts, the data, the information that we're supposed to accept as being valid. Jesus said, I am the truth. He said, it's all about me, is what Jesus says. You see, we've been looking at the points and the parts and the particulars and the facts and the elements, and it's always just been, Martha, no. Yes, good. You got it. You believe in the resurrection. And let me tell you what. Whatever you believe about the resurrection, he says, I am the resurrection. I am the resurrection. And I think until Christians are able to adjust, where we think that there are things in our mind, a list of things, pieces and points, and there are even verses and passages, and we say, well, I believe this and I believe that, and it's all about what we pour of ourselves into Christ and how much we allow he who dwells within us. That's why he said in Colossians, the Christ in you, the hope of glory. Let's pray together. Father, if there is someone here today who is looking for all the right facts, all of the right to correct information, they're looking for all the pieces and the parts of the puzzle, but they're not pouring everything into a search for you, in knowing you, listening to you, drawing close to you. If it's not all about you, they're going to miss something. Ultimately, even Jesus' enemies had to quit dealing with the things that he said and the things that he did, and they had to make a decision about what they were going to do with Jesus. We've got to make that same decision, Lord, and I pray that you'd help us make it. Help us grow into it. If there's someone here today who needs to make that step, who needs to step out to make that leap, that launch, I pray with all that they know and all that they've come to understand and believe, they'd be willing to see that there's someone more important, and it's you.